Next Generation Extension Learning for Leaders series. We do these about once a month, although here in September we have a bonus edition, this conversation about this really exciting and engaging conversation among the Natural Resource Conservation Service folks, as well as Cooperative Extension and our experiment station partners. And so my name is Chuck Hibbard. I'm ECOP chair and service moderator for this conversation. Representing NRCS, Jimmy Bramlett. Jimmy, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am the Deputy Chief of Programs with NRCS.
Fantastic. All right. There we go. I go down to, yeah, so Jimmy, if you'd like to talk about the purpose of this leadership summit that we had in August.
All right, we'll be happy to do that. And I want to start off by expressing a lot of appreciation to two folks here, Sharif Branham and Amanda Schaller. They worked with Robin and Jeff. Basically, Robin and Jeff kind of started this, I'm going to say about a year and a half ago. They came and did a lot of interviews with division directors, national technical specialists, other program managers here at the national office, and really just wanted to learn a lot more about NRCS at our level and then take that information back to all of you. And as a result of the complexity, I think, of our organization, what we ended up deciding is it would be good if we could all get together and visit face-to-face. And so I'll talk a little more about that in just a moment. But basically the purpose of our August Leadership Summit was just to say, kind of have a gut check, for lack of a better phrase, in our relationship between NRCS and the land-grant universities. One of the things we acknowledged is we actually, over the long period of our relationship together, have done some fantastic work, not the least of which is the cooperative soil survey. We are the only country in the world to have what we call wall-to-wall coverage associated with a soil survey, and it is a fantastic resource that many folks use all across this country in many ways. You all, in the work with your extension specialists and others, have helped us basically advance that soil survey. And what we're doing now, in fact, is we're seeing a resurgence in some of the ways that we want to continue on with that cooperation. And that's a good example of trying to enhance some of the good things that we've already done. Another example we like to point to is the relationship we have with all of you in communicating research that is collected by both of our organizations, how you all try to communicate what needs to be done out there across the landscape, how we try to show folks on the ground how to do it. So there's a really good complementary relationship between NRCS and all the land-grant universities and extension in that regard. So we wanted to see where we were, then start to think about and look toward the future because our systems, our activities, the world in which we live is extremely dynamic, and there's a lot of change all around us. And so we wanted to see if there are ways that we could identify our ability to work together and then go through a variety of breakout sessions that were facilitated in order to begin to prioritize some of those. So let's look at the next slide real quick if we can, Chuck. I think one of the things that as we're looking at who all participated in this, we had a mix of NRCS representation and a mix of research representation and extension representation from the land-grant university side. And that's on the left-hand side of the screen for those of you who are looking at the screen. Interestingly, from the NRCS side, what you see is a cross-representation of state conservationists, national leadership, and even regional leadership. So some of the things that we talked about was, who our customers are, how we're organized, and as we engaged in the discussion, one of the things that we shot for was to try to make sure we had a good sense of cross-representation from both organizations there in order to be able to do that prioritization or brainstorming or action identification work that we wanted to do. So this meeting actually came together basically as a result of some of the earlier discussions we talked about with Robin and Jeff from both the extension and research. I know we're talking with only extension here today, but it was a broader group of individuals that talked about the relationship with NRCS and the interest and the desire in order to try and enhance that relationship. And so through the course of the fall, last summer and last fall, some of the ideas of the engagement that we had warranted a need for more of a focused discussion. I think what happened is we had some of conversations amongst ourselves. You all had some conversations amongst yourselves. You all may have had some conversations with research. And what we learned through the whole process is these individual activities, these individual discussions probably wouldn't get us to that level of engagement that I think both sets of organizations, or all three sets of organizations, if you will, wanted to try to make sure that we had some sense of traction, accountability, a focus of the type of work that we could do moving forward into the future. And so throughout the course of the spring and summer, there were a lot of planning discussions about how it is and who it is that we should have come together. And then that came to fruition in August of our last month in August. So let's look at the next slide if we can. So the last slide showed you basically who participated in a lot of our discussions. This one basically gives you a sense of what we did once we all got there. And I talked a little bit about this up front, but to give it a more texture at this point, we really reaffirmed with each other who our customers are, what our mission is, what our role is, how we're organized. And easy enough, when you first say who our customers are, we all collectively point to a producer right off the bat. But then as we get into who else are our customers, we did notice some additional commonality, but some differences as well. So for example, from an NRCS perspective, we get involved with soil and water conservation districts a lot, whereas Extension gets involved with county level government a lot. We do work with county government. Extension does work with districts, but to a lesser degree on each side. And then when you step back a little bit further from there, at the extension level, at the state level, the discussion morphed into stakeholders and state units of government and the funding streams. For us, it's more the federal unit of government and the funding streams associated with that. And so we talked about those commonalities and those differences. And we also talked a little bit about the autonomy of our state conservationists, how they make decisions, how they get budget, as well as some of the priority setting mechanisms that are associated with state units of government and the like. So as a whole, I think it was very enlightening. It was a good reminder for me. I've worked for 30 years with land-grant universities, both as a faculty member, as a partner with Extension and with research. And it was a good reminder for me of the positive things we do together, but the differences that we have to keep in mind and how we have to work through those to overcome those. So as you look down through there and see what allows us to improve or opportunities for working collaboratively, we did have a group come in and facilitate several breakout sessions or breakout groups with very common questions. And so we had some iterations on Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning where we broke out, brainstormed in smaller groups, came back together, reported to the broader groups of what those opportunities were and ways we might prioritize those. And so on Wednesday, as we began to break up, the facilitators were beginning to take the information from us, and they were going to work with us on trying to help us collect, because there were walls and walls and walls of flip chart poster boards all over the walls, and then a variety of ways through which we talked about how we would prioritize those. So at the end of the session, Robin and Jeff and Sharif and Amanda agreed that they would continue to stay engaged with the facilitators and kind of help assimilate all of that information and then begin to report that back out to us. So I want to pause for just a second here and give, at least from this side, Amanda and Sharif an opportunity to add to or take away anything that I've said up to this point, and or give a little bit of a snippet as far as what happens after the August session in Fort Collins before we get on to the next slide.
Thanks, Jimmy. This is Sharif. Subsequent to that meeting, we have engaged with Jeff and Robin. Amanda and I have met with them several times to talk about the data we collected from that meeting. So as a result of that meeting, the facilitators collected a lot of the feedback from the groups, from the breakout sessions, from the general sessions, and organized it for us so we have a script of all that was discussed. We have notes about how decisions were made, about how to prioritize the various operational and resource-related areas. And we've been in discussions about making sure that the notes accurately account for what was discussed and the preliminary decisions that were made. From there, I'm going to be reviewing those items and coming up with a report that will be useful for reporting out to those who were there present and getting some consensus on some items related to that, next steps. And then ultimately, what we hope to have is a report out that will be useful for those who not only were present, but those who weren't present, who will benefit from the collaboration that we hope to facilitate through this process. We really much see this as a very beginning, early stage of increasing collaboration between NRCS and the extension and research, and we're hoping that this would be a catalyst for that purpose. But we do want to put some structure to it and help design a path forward.
All right, very good. So between Sharif and myself, we have about an average cadence in our talk. I got the slow Georgia draw, and Sharif is very, very quick in his cadence. So, but to give you a sense, basically, of what came out of that, in no sense or sort of priorities, and along the lines of what Sharif was saying is going to be coming. The next slide will give you some high-level outputs associated with that. And so I want to turn it over, Chuck, to you to talk a little bit about the left-hand side of this, and then I'll pick back up on the right-hand side.
Great. And thank you, Jimmy and Sharif. So, from our perspective, I think we found this whole conversation to be really robust, very engaging, kind of we reminded ourselves and each other of some of the opportunities that could be pursued with a little more focus and a little bit more of a deliberate approach to some of these really important collaborative opportunities. So we did kind of end up with two major themes. One was really more around organizational issues, and then another one more about resource issues and other kinds of initiatives. And so on the organizational side, one of the things that we talked about a lot is, could we, in a more robust way, focus on goals and think about, the goals that people in our state working certainly in agriculture, natural resources related areas, what their goals were, how we could align with those goals, how we could better partner together. And I think there were, just a number of examples where, on the ground in our counties, we frequently interact with each other, but we may not really take advantage of the collaborative opportunity that being co-located in a county, not in the same office, but we're in the same general geography, how we could work together more effectively. So common goal setting was one. Traditionally, Extension and the land grants have been very engaged in training and professional development for NRCS professionals, and we think there are opportunities to continue to do this in very targeted ways around really high-profile issues that are really important to our states and to our counties. Institutionalizing a framework for partnering that supports and rewards working together. So that goes beyond just kind of the casual, we know each other, but in fact, how do we build the relationship? And then how do we think about a framework that would be productive? And we think about that both at the local level, but also at the state level, but also at the federal level. And that's why the conversations that Robin and Jeff have been having with Sharif and Amanda and Jimmy in terms of, what the opportunities might look like overall. There was a lot of discussion about the field office technical guide, and I think for some of us reminded us how important that technical guide is for the work that NRCS does, and how do we use that as a platform also to think about how we work together more effectively and focus on state level opportunities. Another opportunity that came up was so how do we really enhance and strengthen our state level connections? So thinking about extension and research participation in our state technical committees, helping with engineering standards, Farm Bill program rollout, new Farm Bill hopefully to be approved soon, some changes and opportunities there. So, and there were others that also came up. Sharif was right. The whole room was littered with flip charts. You know, we had great facilitators who helped us capture a whole lot of ideas. And so there were a lot of other ideas that came forward that will also be added to this list as we think about what could we do better together. So really some exciting and encouraging topics on the organizational side. Jimmy, what do you think on the other side?
So Chuck, thanks so much, and I agree, and I can hear your enthusiasm. And so one of the things that we shared in that enthusiasm, it's almost like the more we talked and the more we brainstormed, the sky was the limit, and we never could get to the top of it. And so on the resource side, many of us have been engaged on a variety of levels with soil health, and we all, I think, know how wildly popular that has been. But at the same time, there are needs there for being able to better quantify what type of land management activities actually have specific benefits, or what are the level of benefits associated with certain types or combinations of land management activities depending on where you are across the country. And so I won't go down each one of these, the cropping systems. You know, when I look at that and think back to the conversation, one of the things that you all have a skill set in that we need, and that is we are hiring more and more of our staff for NRCS that don't have a farm background. And so in addition to bringing on the new research associated with farm management and agricultural activities in the context of conservation, just the social side of helping individuals that work with NRCS that may not have a good handle on cropping systems or tillage systems, even with different types of cropping rotations, and some of the risk activities that landowners have to deal with, whether it's capital risk or whether it's climatic risk or whether it's legal risk or a whole litany of other things that they have to market risk and so on and so forth. So just trying to bring all that and have more of a common reinforcement of the way that we provide our complementary types of assistance to landowners. So one of the things that we did talk a little bit about, and I just want to make sure you all are, the broader group here is aware of, is the fact that NRCS is in the middle of beginning, or I should say at the beginning, of a fundamental change in the way that we plan to provide assistance to landowners. We historically like to think of ourselves as a technical science-based planning organization. And as we've become more popular with both sides of the aisle, being Republicans and Democrats, and both sides of the House, the Senate, and the House, or both sides of Congress, the Senate and the House, we have attracted more resources for this country for conservation investments. And our traditional approach to providing technical assistance to landowners has not kept up. We have not changed the way we need to do that. And so part of what our landowners are asking us for is to spend more time with them, reading their land, getting to know their farm, providing them with some economic feedback on the potential conservation investments. Even though we offer financial assistance, they have a responsibility and a financial commitment also. And so they're asking us, what are the economic benefits associated with doing things like that? As we make a shift in the future to being much more efficient in the way we provide that direct assistance to landowners, we're going to create a new gap. And that gap is going to be better defining the impacts of these conservation practices on the ground. We have a lot of pressure from Congress, from the Office of Management and Budget at the White House, to environmental groups, other advocacy groups, to be able to answer the question, what is the impact of conservation practices that are being put on the ground? And while we can help answer that question, we need your help and we need help of others So in the future, what you'll see us asking for on the resource issues and initiative side is helping us set up science-based approaches to a broader framework of collecting empirical data associated with the installation of conservation practices. We're fortunate with a delivery system of over 2,500 offices. And at any given time, roughly 140,000 clients or producers who are putting conservation practices on the ground. And they, on average, put some 550,000 conservation practices on the ground. That magnitude of work dictates that we need help trying to evaluate the effectiveness with others. And you all will be able to help us play a pivotal role in that process in the future. So those are, again, just some examples that I can remember that we talked about. And again, I'll pause here and defer to Amanda and Sharif and see if they've got anything else they want to add to it.
Thanks, Jimmy. Just to add that these two areas, organizational issues and resource issues, even though they're listed separately, they very much have interplay with each other. Particularly when we talk about the field office technical guide and all of these resource issues, as well as making sure that our staff are trained in how to assist customers with these issues. So even though they're in separate categories, they're definitely not separated. And one of the things that we had looked at while we were in the summit was trying to find areas that were the most important, but we did not actually get to a place where we had prioritized them. As in terms of what we would tackle in years to come and what would be done first and what would be the initial steps for any or each of the categories. So even though some of these that are listed here are examples of ideas that had been talked about, there is a lot of additional work to come in terms of determining what are the next steps in making progress on these issues and even formulating some concrete reporting items to share with you all and with the rest of our group. But I think we have a little more on that on the next slide, so I'll stop there.
So Chuck, with that on the timeline looking forward, we will turn it back over to you.
Good, Jimmy, thank you. And actually, before we go to the timeline, I thought it might be appropriate to stop for a moment and give Robin and or Jeff an opportunity to share a little bit about their perspective in this conversation. And then maybe we open it up for comments and questions before we go to the final timeline. So Robin, Jeff, anything from your end?
Well, maybe a couple of observations is that, this sort of reminded us of the importance of some things like reaching into, collaborating with the state technical committee. And that goes beyond just simply saying, well, we're going to help in standard developments or project by project. It was a good reminder to remember that there's an interface at the state level, and we spent a fair amount of time kind of digging into, well, what is working in our relationship between the deans, the directors on the extension side, or the directors of research, and the state conservationists. The Field Office Technical Guide was, I think, a fascinating discussion, as you pointed out, Chuck, and that reminded us that it's more than just helping to, create an individual engineering standard for a specific practice. That guide truly does guide a lot of what happens in a state. And then there was some reminding us of sort of key issues like water quality, water resource management, the soil health kinds of things. On the new side of it, I think my observation is that issues like how we might, in a land grant entity, work with NRCS on some of their training and professional development needs. There's a whole area there that could be pursued. We just simply skimmed the surface of what that issue is about. Some discussion on leveraging and partnering the future of our staffing on both sides of this question, about how can we build certain areas of expertise collaboratively. And then maybe a couple of process notes. This really, while we really focused on the importance of that relationship within a state between the state conservationist and the dean and director of extension and research, We were also reminded, and I think you're going to see us begin to take some steps on how we can do a better job at connecting with our COPs, whether it's ECOP or SCOP, and at Jimmy's level of NRCS nationally. And it also pointed out there were several of our regional executive directors and administrators participating along with the regional conservationists. It really pointed us to, I think, a need and or a desire to do some things collaboratively at the regional scale and collaborating at that sort of regional management level of this. Jeff, you want to add any of your observations?
Thank you, Chuck and Robin and Jimmy, Amanda, Sharif. I would echo particularly the last elements that Robin was mentioning in that hierarchy, but just as important at every level, the state, region, and national. And the design of the participants on the land-grant university side was such that when we get to the stage of follow-up, and a very key part of a meeting or a summit is the follow-up and action steps. And we saw it in the participants with the directors in the room across different regions and the respective executive directors, research and extension, and with our 1890 colleagues as well, the administrators, that the follow-up was going to be rich and would occur at multiple levels and would allow us to be a little customized, but also to successfully follow through at those different levels, recognizing how land-grant universities tend to operate and how NRCS operates as well.
Great, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Robin. So why don't we throw it open? Any comments, any reactions, maybe any experiences that you've had at the state level that would either look like an opportunity relative to this brief overview of some of our conversations in terms of the relationship between NRCS and cooperative extension? Fred, you were part of this conversation. What's your perspective?
You know, I wouldn't be without words.
I know. That's why I called on you.
Yeah, but for some reason I couldn't get it off mute.
Oh.
I thought it was really productive. I think the biggest value that I got out of it, I learned a lot more about NRCS than I knew before. And I think a lot of us did. And hopefully they learned a lot about us too. There are tremendous amount of opportunities to help. You know, we should be their feeder program for their field folks. And, you know, I think there's opportunity to design our curriculum to meet their needs in our colleges of ag. I think there's opportunities to do professional development to help their staff. But on the other, you know, on the other side, I think there's opportunities for extension then to collaborate locally and at the state level for on projects. So, you know, it's almost a relationship that's identical to experimentation and extension, where we're kind of attached at the hip. I think this is an opportunity for us to attach at the hip at another USDA sister institution where we have pretty much the same goals and missions.
Thanks, Fred. Other comments? Reactions? Why don't I go ahead and share next steps with you? Was someone going to jump in?
Yeah. Yes, Chuck, this is Mark.
Yeah.
You know, what Fred, and based on what has been said, I'm going to go back in time now for a minute. You know, I can see excellent opportunities for both NRCS as well as for the land grant community. because I can recall the relationship and we still have a relationship with the local plant materials center here in Georgia, and to the point where that relationship enabled us to, let's say, co-release a flagio marche cordgrass in order to control beach erosion. And I was trying to find a date here on my calendar. Just this past summer, we was invited by our NRCS partners to a meeting at the Plant Materials Center to just share basically what we're talking about now. What can we do together in order to enhance not only NRCS, but the universities as well? And so the conversation that we've had, the conversation that you guys was engaged in Colorado, it really excited me from the standpoint. I said, oh, okay, we have these opportunities which we can not only help landowners, but we can provide opportunities for our students to get that hands-on experience that they need in order to prior to becoming employees with NRCS and other USDA agencies and industry. So, I see this, what we're doing now, as a win-win opportunity. It's not only for us who are engaged in the conversation, but it's just a win-win opportunity for, the next generation employees. That's about stewardship and conserving the soil, water quality, and the works. So, I'm really excited about it, about what is happening and what's going to continue to happen.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else? So why don't I overview just quickly what next steps look like. Really what we wanted to accomplish today was share with you the nature of the conversation, some of the highlights of the conversation, and then also maybe whet your appetite a little bit about what's going to come next. And so the leadership group, by about October 1st or so, will draft an operational plan and edit the summit notes, so we would have all of that information. In early October, that information would be distributed to summit participants to start with, and then feedback from summit participants that would, coming back to both NRCS and land-grant university leadership to better clarify anything that needs clarification or add depth to anything that maybe was not quite as detailed as we would have liked it to be. And then late October, early November, a broader discussion with NRCS and land-grant universities of the summary report and specifically the recommendations that come from this. And so to me, that's the real opportunity to bring this conversation to a point where we can begin to think about what does this look like going forward, and how do we continue to build on this really important partnership. And Mark and Fred and others, I think you really lifted up, excuse me, some great examples of that partnership. And Jimmy, your thoughts about different ways, better ways that we could interact and engage with your organization. So I think there's just lots of upside here. So this is the end of our formal remarks. Any other comments or suggestions or reactions from anybody at this point?
So, Chuck, this is Jimmy. I just wanted to express appreciation to you all and to Fred and Mark for the comments, and and Robin just wanted to reiterate, and Jeff, and just reiterate and echo that we're excited about the future. We think that there's a lot of upside to all of this, and as we engage more and more with each other, as I mentioned earlier, the sky is the limit. And so, we really appreciate your commitment to trying to make this partnership work and reinforce and re-enhance our relationship together. And I think, as it was said earlier, this is kind of a nice natural fit. And just wanted to reiterate NRCS's commitment to try to make this thing work together.
One of the other things that, this is Amanda, that we are interested in is trying to find ways that are best to engage and reach out with all of the people that actually need to collaborate and get their ideas on what we have been working on. Obviously, this was a group of leaders who came together, but we fully recognize that we do not completely represent all of the different ideas and circumstances that are in the country. And we are definitely looking for feedback on how to best engage others and to create buy-in and get kind of a grassroots movement going, so that it's easy to collaborate, it's easy to engage because it's natural, and we have a cultural structure in place, as well as at the national level and state level having formal connections.
That's a great point, Amanda. And I thought one of the fun things about the conversation, we had several state conservationists there, as well as extension and research leaders, and what some states are doing to do exactly what you described. There's some great pilots out there. There's some great examples. We love to see that kind of behavior, that kind of forward-looking collaborative approach. And so more to come on that. So I think, to your point, how do we, as we begin to frame these recommendations, how do we then reach back down into our organizations, extension and research, and our partnership with you to think about what that means on the ground and the choices that our folks can make on the ground. Huge upside potential there. Anything else for the good of the cause? Well, Jimmy, to you, Amanda, Sharif, Robin, Jeff, others that were involved in this conversation, thank you so much for your time today. And to the leadership team that's going to put all this stuff together, sift through all the complexity of the conversations that we had and come out with some great recommendations. Thanks to you. We look forward to your report and the opportunity to move forward on this conversation. So thank you, everybody, for your time today.